Ever since you can remember, you felt something in your chest telling you to move, to love, to speak, to try. Day after day, you pretend you don't hear it calling, or maybe you dismiss it as silliness or worse. But it's there, ready for you, and it will wait for you as long as you need. My name is Johnny G, and I invite you to join me on a journey of awakening as we dare to embrace our light. This is Refractive. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Refractive. I'm your host, Johnny G. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Lisa Goodpaster. Lisa is an author and the founder of the Stephood Project. This is an organization with a mission of changing how kids experience divorce. Lisa is the first child ever to grow up and prove what happened to her, which was alienation from her mother for over 40 years at the hands of her stepmother. She uses this very painful experience today to shine a light that helps others who are dealing with parental trauma. And today, that's really what we're going to talk about. And thank you so much, Lisa, for coming onto the show, kind of bearing your soul here in the hopes of helping other people. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Johnny. It's a pleasure. And I'm glad there are podcasters like you that are making space for what's a really important topic, our families.
It absolutely is. I heard someone say once that no one gets out of life unscathed. And I have to say, our parents, they're doing the best they can, right? And I look at the baggage that I've carried from situations with my father and situations with my mother, and I think about what would happen if I had kids. I know that you're a mom. I don't have kids. And I think about all the things that I might pass on to my kids without even realizing I'm doing it. All of the unhealthy types of competition and the snippiness and anger and things that I can't hide 24 hours a day. I can hide from the server at the restaurant, but I can't hide it 24 hours a day. And like, what a heavy burden to live with that. And so, I just think it's really important the way you help people see parents as just humans who've hurt us, doing the best they can, and we can come out on the other side of it.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely.
Is it okay if I start us kind of from a foundation of maybe just setting or understanding some terms? Would that be all right?
Yes. Absolutely.
So when we talk about parental trauma, what are the types of experiences or situations that would qualify for that term? Because I don't want to use it lightly.
Okay. So for parents, it's childhood trauma. And this is what's most important. We have a very significant time when we're babies and we're born. We are indebted to who is taking care of us, right? So childhood trauma affects the foundation, the beginning part of our brain. So from 0 to 18, anything that overwhelms the mind is considered traumatic. Okay.
Wow.
Anything that overwhelms the mind. What's even harder for children that are being traumatized is when they are left alone with their trauma. So, for example, like you had mentioned, there's, I call them patterns and behavior. We all have them, and we all learn the way we learn from our family. But when it's specific, it's our parents are there for protection, and when our parents cannot protect us. So, for example, divorce, right? That's traumatic. That hit, that wound, is there forever. Doesn't go away until we grow up and we realize how that traumatic experience affects us in our day-to-day, mostly in our relationships. So that's how they always play out. But parental trauma happens when parents are not, when I say online, they're not present for us. they are either in survival mode themselves and don't realize it. They don't have the skills to know what it's like to have someone say, hey, you're safe. I got you. Everything's going to be okay. Instead of back in my day, it's children were meant to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
So anything that a child mind gets overwhelmed. And then what that child does, like I did, is we suppress our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And emotions are a big part of life.
Yes. Yes.
They're important, and there's a lot of shame that goes around emotions. And when parents weren't taught that, unless they learn from it, they're going to most likely repeat that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, and the kid is like, now everything's kind of, you see like a slow shift in parenting, but it's a really unfortunate thing that happens to many kids. I don't think I've met one person that hasn't experienced trauma.
Sure.
And right. We won't, trauma is something that is preventable, but it's also something that is part of the human suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your definition though, because I'm not a clinician. I don't study this kind of stuff. I don't know about this kind of stuff. And the idea that anything that overwhelms the mind is a trauma, that opens the door for looking differently at so many parts of our existence. It's not just being, physically or sexually abused. It's not just, it can be so many things that leave that lasting imprint there. And I wonder, how did that trauma manifest in your life? I know that you have a very powerful story, and I wonder if you'd share it with us.
Yeah. So, the way it manifested was, I think, how it manifests for a lot of humans. When you're young, you don't know. And I think I was about 7.5 when I went to go stay with my dad for a week, and it turned into a lot longer. So I lived with my dad and stepmom between 7 and 13. And that's when the alienation, and because it's unnatural to not like your parent. Everyone has to understand this. It's unnatural as a little kid to not want to be with your parent.
Okay. Yeah.
Why? Because we have a biological need to connect to our parents, right? So when my parents divorced, I had a very, in my mind, I thought I had a very safe attachment with my dad, because my dad was very emotional, and I responded to his emotions. So when what happened was, my stepmom is just like maybe it's not just stepmoms, all parents do this, but my stepmom is not a very healthy person. And she was very threatened by my dad's past. And it's kind of like Cinderella, but without the prince. So everything that she said about my mom was a lie, and I believed it. And it's evil.
You're supposed to trust her. She's an adult, right? Like, you're supposed to be able to believe what an adult says.
Right. And so basically my entire foundation of how I saw my own mother was erased and replaced with lies and fear, that she took it all the way to when I was in my mom's belly and I was an evil baby and I would kick my mom, and my mom, things like, I kill my mom in her story. I hurt kids. I mutilate animals. So I read this, I don't know, maybe I was probably between 11 and 13, and how many times I read it, I don't know. But what happened was, my mom assumed that I just preferred my dad. And she always and parents always assume that they love that other parent more. No, something horrible was happening. And so my reactions as a child, as a teen, were loud. And
Can I step in and ask, when you say you read this, I don't know how many times, what were you reading?
Oh, I'm sorry. Reading the script that my stepmom wrote about me and my mom, that changed my perception, that erased my foundation. So
She like
when
handed you a paper. She was like, or was it supposed to be like a fun bedtime story, or like how did that?
oh my God, it's really bad. Um, she had it in a place where I would see it, and it's in my book. But basically, yeah, it was a direct hit on my mom, on my dad. Uh, my mom's name in my stepmom's book is Eve. My mom's name is Eva. Okay, so a little kid is not gonna,
Yeah.
right? So it's very, very psychology. A lot of psychologists have read it and they said, Jesus, this is a malignant narc. This is a sociopath. This is bad.
Yeah.
Um, so the kid, I just read it and I just assumed I believed it. Why wouldn't I? Right? Because I wasn't seeing my mom, and my dad would be like, "Go see your mom," and I'd be like, "No, are you kidding me?" And so
Wow.
my mom didn't know, and so my mom being, looking back, both my parents had the same goals, just different methods. My mom's like, "You got to clean your room." I'm like, "I'm not doing anything you tell me." So it was really uh, a psychological, oh my gosh, just a nightmare. It obliterated my mother, my and when this happens, uh you don't know who you are or how you're going to be in the world. So what I did was I just ignored and I pushed everything down. What else was I
Yeah.
supposed to do?
Yeah.
um and it unfolded, it unfolds creepy, not creepy, I would say naturally, in a way where you start to notice things about yourself, like uh and parents don't tell you this. Just like, I would have trouble, I would have nightmares. I would I remember early on I was peeing in my pants. I was so
Yeah.
scared. And my stepmom, being the manipulator that she was, is uh, would always blame me, or it's your parents' divorce. So I always assumed I was just a child that parents just had a really bad divorce. No. And that's where it gets tricky. It's not the divorce. The divorce is one thing, but to have a child hate another parent, that's evil. That should never happen. We need our parents. That's how we survive.
Yeah.
This is why a lot of, like, broken homes or kids will go into gangs, because they are looking to connect. So I like to, like, always, when I talk about a negative, I always spin it with a positive, in that, well, I'm Latina and she couldn't alienate me from my entire family. There's too many of us. So luckily, I had aunts and uncles and cousins that I attached to. It's not the same as losing a parent, but this went on for years, where it's like you become allergic to like, I was allergic to my mom. I couldn't look at her in her eyes. I didn't want to be around her.
Wow.
um, all kinds of things, all the most important, significant things that you need your parents for. My stepmom obliterated that.
Yeah.
And the only way she could accept me is if I was a screwed up evil stepchild.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, and apparently there are millions of kids out there that have endured this type of abuse.
So what did your healing journey look like? Because I can't
Mhm.
even imagine, the process of slowly realizing that maybe you're seeing the world through a tinted lens, or having people who are willing to have that difficult conversation with you about, like, your perspective doesn't seem clear, or I don't even know. So I'm just going to stop guessing. Tell
Yeah.
us, how did you work through that?
Johnny, I was always, my entire life, there was something internal inside of me that just, I was angry, right? I was so angry, and I would have disproportionate reactions. And throughout my life, different stages. And I was always seeking, and I've seeked every type of therapist, Christian counselors, to, like, anyone that would take my insurance, and I would go and talk to them, like, I'm feeling this way. And it always went back to the divorce. Oh, okay. And when I left home. And I think that was one of the biggest things, is that I left home. I got pregnant, got married, left home. And I think becoming a mother, I just suppressed. And I'm kind of grateful right now that I was such a young mom that I was still suppressing things down. But I parented my son on, my biggest thing was, I'm giving him a good start. He's never going to feel 1 ounce of this ever. And I remember feeling that even before I was a parent, like at like 8 or 9, hanging out with my dad thinking, I am never going to do this to my kid, but keeping it inside, because nobody knows what kids feel internally. They don't. Psychologists, everyone wants to like guess, but nobody knows. So I think I basically, you fast forward, and I've been married now for 20 years. I was married for a short time to my son's father. We divorced, but we co-parented, never alienated. He's well adjusted. He grew up with 2 healthy step parents, even my husband at the time, he thought, yeah, I mean, your mom and dad just bad divorce, or just bad parents. Well, had a trigger, and I called my dad and I said, Dad, I need you to bring me something. He's like, what are you talking about? I need you to, and I referred to it as proof at the time. I need you to bring me my proof. Your proof? Yes, my proof. What are you talking about? Just check your wife's nightstand. And he checked it, and the script was there for 27 years where she slept. She kept the script that obliterated my mom's right and my right to be loved and nurtured by my mom.
And your dad had no idea. Like you said earlier, that he was
He
like,
didn't
go
have
to your
no
mom.
idea.
And you were like, no, he doesn't know what's happening.
He knew that, like, my dad just had my dad's more like a coach. My mom was more like maybe a manager. They just had different ways of parenting. Still, this should have never happened. This is why I'm a big preacher of co-parent, or your kids. It's dangerous if you don't. Kids don't want 4 parents. We just want 2. We can barely handle that. We love you guys. So basically, yeah, my dad, okay. And so my dad did, he brought it to me, and I looked, I remember looking at it and thinking, holy moly, this isn't good. And going to one of my psychologists, and they're like, I don't know if we can help you. What do you mean you don't know if you can help me?
Yeah.
I'm like 44 years old. Like, what the heck happened to me? And luckily, I found a place called the Hoffman Process. A lot of celebrities go there, and they help you deal and rediscover your authentic self.
Okay. You said the Hoffman Process?
The Hoffman Process was just the beginning of it. And there was a lot of unraveling. Like I said, the way that this alienation steals every aspect of your life. And I wasn't just alienated. I was molested, abused. It is pretty horrific. But I survived, and I remembered what happened. So my truth is what really set me free, is owning that, okay, all this horrible, unimaginable things could happen, but it didn't happen to my son. He's 29. I have a relationship with both of my parents. Everything bad that happened, everything good happened as well.
Yeah.
It just took a long time, and there was a lot of suffering. And it didn't just hurt me, it hurt everybody that loved me.
Yeah.
And at the end, it was really about, now it's just like owning and loving my story and my truth. Like, yes, this stuff was horrible. And a lot of it's embedded. When I mean embedded trauma, it can't be undone. Okay. So I know what it's like to be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's sustained trauma. So parts of it is sustained trauma where I'll know now, like, oh, like I'll have a uncomfortable feeling around my mom, and I'll like check myself, and I'm like, the body remembers everything.
There you
so
go.
when I got that script, what goes in the mind stays in the body.
Yeah. Yes.
And so when you have, I guess, the script that was used to obliterate your mind, and it's awful, but it's also fascinating on how we do survive.
Yes.
And every human being we survive trauma the same way. It's a biological response. It's a normal biological response to a abnormal situation.
Okay, so this is what you mean by like, you mean repressing, right? Like that's how we survive
Right.
it. Right.
Right. So we repress. So one of the ways we repress is we deny. Like, no, that didn't happen. Why? It's like if you watch body language experts, right? The body doesn't lie. So
Yeah.
you can tell when somebody is not sure of themselves because they're more like, oh, I'm not very sure of myself. But when someone's really sure of themselves, they're like, oh, they even talk with their hands. Like it was, don't talk with your hands. I was like, talking with your hands actually means be more truthful because you're not being heard. So there's so much education and fascinating things about this. And at the same time, it's also, it can be sad, but I look at it as more as fascinating now because it's like, oh, no wonder why I could never sit still. People used to say, oh, you have ADD. No, it was just my nervous system. Because how could I stay still? I didn't feel comfortable. I wasn't safe. My body was always telling me, you're not safe, but I didn't know that as a kid. So one of the hardest things I had to do was learn how to slow down.
Okay.
And slowing down in the way that I would over clean. I had to slow down. I was always really fast, doing things really fast, not taking time to you get dressed, just the simplest of things. Oh, like you're always in a rush.
So if a listener has some of this unresolved parental trauma, whether it's similar to your experience or whether it's something completely different, how can they start to move forward?
So the first thing is awareness. Like for me, it's like, okay, what's going on in your life that you would like to change? Like, how are you showing up? Are you very defensive? Are
Rageful
you
or
yeah,
suspicious
yes,
or yeah.
yes, exactly. Do you find yourself wanting to be isolated instead of being with people? Is it hard for you to trust people? Things that a lot of times it's in our relationships, like when you get mad, right? When we get mad at people, like anger is so powerful, and it's also like you can't get rid of it. But how we react in anger will tell you how healthy we are, right? Because you see a lot of adults that sometimes they don't realize it's like, I swear that adult that's like 50 is 15. Why? Because I know what it's like to be 15 and also 50 and feel like you're in puberty and also menopause at the same time.
Look, yes, I have my share of completely irrational anger responses that, like, I look back, one time I chased a mailman down the street in anger. Like, what is the matter with me? Like, what? I listen, we don't have time, but like, I'm just telling you, can you imagine? I'm literally running down the street full speed after a mailman out of rage, right? Like, so yes, it's ridiculous, but it was all I could do. It was all I could do.
Yes, because in that moment, yes, and I've done many. I've never chased a mailman. I have chased ex-boyfriends, in cars. I've done it's like it's almost like even when it's coming out of your mouth, a part of your brain is like, what did you just do? And like, I can't stop because it's automatic. When it's in our body, it's in our nervous system. People have to treat the mind, you actually have to treat the body. So I mean, for someone that's watching, why is that kid chasing that mailman down? But it's like, what happened? It's like, no, what happened to him that he's chasing that mailman? Let's unravel the layers. And really, it's, especially with me, it's like, well, yeah, there was a lot of anger. I was shamed. I didn't get the validation, the closure. I didn't know. That's the thing, is that's why it was so important, was when I had heard the first time, Lisa, there's nothing wrong with you. You just survived. You've been operating on an older operating system that doesn't serve you the way you survived as a child. You needed to. You had no choice.
Yeah.
But how we survive as an adult doesn't mesh well anymore because, you can't you're in a work meeting and you can't throw a fit like an 8-year-old. It's just not gonna, it
Right.
doesn't pan out. And a lot of times childhood survivors will numb. It's one of the
Mhm.
big things, is because you turn 18 and then your parents think they're done, that you don't realize, what do? We start numbing, they start drinking, yes. And it's like, this is why it's so important, because it even gets worse. The longer we suppress our emotions, this is why we have because I got really sick. We get autoimmune disorders,
Okay.
rheumatoid,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of these things that are happening, and there's science and doctors that have been coming forward and saying, hey, the mind and body have to work together, and when you're traumatized, your mind is disconnected from your body, you're kind of disassociated,
Yeah.
and that's a normal response. And people
Mhm.
think, oh no, it's bad. I'm like, no, your brain's just protecting yourself. It's everything is done out of survival.
Yes. And so this awareness is an important step that you mentioned about, how am I reacting? Where is it out of proportion? What am I feeling in my body? What type of situations bring this up? Okay. So that awareness, this is an important foundational step. How else do we, what else do we need to do? Obviously, I would imagine, depending on the severity, maybe we need some professional help. But in addition to that, what are some steps to take if I want to continue down the path of healing?
Okay, so let me give you a good example. Okay, so I was married for over 21 years and never thought I would get divorced. And I don't think he did either. So when I was processing all of this pain, I would have these reactions towards my ex-husband. Or even before. I put my husband on a pedestal. He was a pilot, so it's like, you can't have a bad day. You're like supreme being up here. And so when he would have a bad day, I would be like, what's wrong with you? Why do you have a bad day? Like, you're like, everything's like, why would you have a bad day? Like, I don't get it. Instead of being like, what's wrong? Like, what happened? I'm sorry you're having a bad day. That's like way better, right? The reason why I couldn't allow him to be human in space was because it was like he was the band-aid, right? Relationships are band-aids. It's like, oh wait, my mom and dad, if they weren't there for me, so great, if you have a bad day, who's going to be there for me?
There you go. That's right. I cannot afford you to have your own stuff because you were fixing my stuff for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So things like this, and that wasn't prevalent when we first got married at all. Things just start to unravel like that. So what can a person do? This is a weird thing to say, but we can say this. But
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
okay. Okay. So a lot of times, trauma survivors will continue to repeat their story over and over, and all you're doing is ruminating or thinking, and you're kind of reprogramming your brain, so you get more depressed. This is why a lot of normal psychology doesn't work, because you ever sit in a psychologist's office and you talk about the most heart-wrenching stuff, and they're like, and then you leave and you're like, oh my God, that was even so much harder, right?
Yeah.
Because what we speak is so powerful. So I had to relearn a lot of neuroplasticity, right? I had to relearn how to reprogram my own brain. I also had to understand that you really should only talk to one person when you're healing, when you're in the depths of it. You should really only have one person you talk to about your therapy.
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise, you're kind of reprogramming all the work that you've already done.
Yeah.
So there were lots of times in my therapy where I just had to stay quiet. Like, I'd be quiet for like a day or two, and that's hard, right? So
Ooh, yeah.
these are just like tricks, things that I didn't know before. But we all have patterns that are positive and negative. It's those negative love patterns that we learn to survive that we kind of put on other people, or we hurt other people with.
How can
So
you know? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, ask me. Yeah.
if you're doing this work, right, if you're putting this effort in, you're getting, help from professionals, you're, being aware of how you show up in an irrational way in the world, how can you know if you're starting to heal? Like, what are, I don't know, what do you think is that progress, the evidence of progress that someone would experience?
So like, it's funny. I say healing is a lifetime sport,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah.
more you do it, the better you get at it, So it's when you are no longer reactive to the things that used to trigger you before.
All right.
That would be the number one, probably the number one, I would say. Number
Yeah.
two, when you are able to see things from a broader perspective,
Mhm, mhm.
when you can get out of your own mind. And that's hard to do because the way the brain actually is formed, it's our subconscious is way bigger than our conscious brain. So it's not easy, but it is fascinating once you start doing it. It just takes time, love for yourself, and knowing that it's part of being human.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's been maybe healing for you to help others. Like, has that helped to reprogram some of this for you?
Um, I what's helped is I think what's helped was that both my parents um, owned their mistakes
Yeah.
to the point where, because like I said, it took 40 years. You imagine the triggers and the family events and all the things that take place, right? And
Right.
trying to get
Bouncing
your parents to
back
say,
from that.
yeah, like, hey, this like what why are you like that? Where's Lisa again? And where she has to act that way, and we play these like, oh no, it's family, and it's so once my mom read the script that was written, because she said, well, how many triggers do you have? And then she read it. It was her owning, oh my God, it's my mom's grace. And just, I could see how much I was ripped off by what an amazing woman she is. And then even my dad, it took him a little bit because it was hard for him. But when both parents, especially from divorce that were high conflict, can come together and go, whoa. And when I say this, most parents from divorce are like, no, no way. And I'm like, they need to read the book. They need to read what I read. Because if that made both my parents come together and say, all right, this isn't right. And my parents are in their 70s now, but I think when parents can own their own mistakes and their own, just their own mistakes, that's massive. That helps. Otherwise, it's an open wound still for your child,
Yeah.
right? Because now my wounds are scars. They serve a purpose. But when it's an open wound, it still hurts.
Yeah. I felt some really powerful emotion coming from you earlier in the episode when you were talking about your son and that he's 29 and he doesn't have to go through what you went through, and that you're there to make sure that you don't put him through that again. And it was really a powerful moment. And I wonder, how do you put up those, let's say, training wheels for yourself so that you don't accidentally, and I mean, nobody's perfect, right? But so that you don't accidentally recreate some of those wounds.
Oh, I always have to be mindful. There's days where I'll still cry. The work I'm in is pretty. It's very traumatic and it's sad. There's a lot of it's very sad. Um, I honestly rely on a higher power. I always have.
Mm-hmm.
I can't look back and not see where along my path there was always, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz, like there was just somebody there, right there, to like, I got you, come this way, come this way. And
Yeah.
so I think that I've always had that. I think it is instilled in me from probably my parents. Obviously the first 7 years were crucial, but with regards to my son, uh he was the best thing. I'll never do anything bigger than being his mom. And I think, did I screw up? Of course I did. Of course I did. He hasn't pointed it out to me yet, but I'm sure I have a little bit. But
Yeah.
honestly, he, it's sometimes I can't believe that he's my son. He's like that gorgeous, that successful. Like,
Yeah.
because even there's times when I don't see myself like that, you know.
Right.
So it's very, yeah, it takes a long time. It's a journey. It's a journey. And the more I own my truth and speak it, because I know that the kids that are trying to be heard aren't, because parents want to assume that they're brainwashed. And it's not always brainwashing. It's like, I didn't just stay with my stepmom my whole life. I had other experiences. So yeah, it's just being very mindful. And I still seek therapy all the time. I have a somatic therapist. Somatic therapy they work with the body. And I think I went like 20 some years. Once I went to the Hoffman, they said, "Oh honey, we hold trauma in our bodies." Nobody told me that the last 20 some years. Why doesn't everybody know this?
That's right.
I was like, so kind of like I had to accept the fact that, okay, I'm not fighting anymore. All this horrible stuff happened and it came with the script. And yeah, I kind of had to bully my parents in the arena and go, this is what happened. And they're like right beside me, like, we support you no matter what you're doing, because they know this is bigger than me. It's bigger than what happened to me. It's everywhere. Our families right now, we are leading in the number one homes and we have the most single parent homes in the entire world.
Yeah.
And how many of those kids are being, suppressing their emotions and are not seeing their parent, or not, it sucks for them.
That's right. Listen, you talked about mindfulness, and as I wrap up the episode, you talked about awareness and mindfulness a couple of times. And every once in a while when I'm out, if I'm at a bar or like I'm out in some social situation and someone says, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm a coach," and I'm a career coach and a spiritual coach. And people say, "Oh, well, what can you teach me, like fix me, like what's up?"
Right.
And I'm like, listen, it really is so easy. It really is so easy. I can, if you're willing to do the work, I can help you in 3 sentences. Okay. You already know, you already are, the answer is in the stillness.
Yes.
And like, there's no greater life lesson I could ever share with anybody other than these 3 sentences. And that the healing, I believe the healing from any damage, I believe that the key to any question or any moment of indecision, I believe everything can be fixed by those 3 truths. Like that's what I believe. And I hear this coming from you. I hear you saying, listen, if we just get quiet and pay attention, because our bodies are supercomputers. They have a program for this. They're
Yes.
giving you the warning light, right?
Yes,
All you have to do is quiet and say, "Oh, there's a warning light. Let's look at the manual."
Yes, that's exactly what anxiety is. And people go, "I have anxiety." I'm like, your warning light is on.
Yeah.
It's just trying to tell you. And we're not taught this as little kids because it wasn't taught to our parents. And, then it just trickles down. And, I don't like labels. I don't like labels. I think labels kind of just put people in a box. I get why we need them sometimes. But you're absolutely right. Staying still and knowing too that we all have a calling. We all have a purpose, a plan. There is something extraordinary inside of everyone. And no matter what you were dealt with, as horrific as it is, you don't have to stay there.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
If listeners want to learn more about you and your services and your amazing story, where would you direct them?
Stephoodproject.org.
Okay, stephoodproject.org.
You can find me on Instagram, Lisa.Goodpaster, Facebook as well, Lisa Goodpaster. And I have
that's ER at the end of pastor, not OR.
Right, ER. Yeah. I'm a pastor, just not one in the church. Not that I don't go to church. It's just, inherited name.
And what's the title of your book if someone wants to look that up?
So this is so funny. So we're working with that title right now, but I think it's gonna be when parents don't parent.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So
Yes.
So we'll tie it to your name. Look up Lisa Goodpaster. And when that book comes out, like we need to listen. I get hairs on the back of my neck when I heard your story. So I know
every
that there's some
kid,
good stuff.
every person that's been mad at their parent that doesn't get the validation is like saying for the book. It's like, it's like if it took me 40 years, I guess so I look at it like this is everyone's evidence. This is everyone to learn from because and I'm grateful that my parents are who they are.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, what better note to end an episode on? I'm grateful that my parents are who they are. And boy, that's beautiful. Lisa, thank you so much for making yourself vulnerable, sharing your story, offering some guidance on how other people can heal. And it's really been a pleasure.
Thank you, Johnny. You as well. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Everyone, as you go out in the world and you encounter all types of people who are just trying to do their best, always remember to aim your light. Have a great day. You've been listening to Refractive Podcast, and this is Johnny G. If you found today's content uplifting, if you think it might make somebody's day better, give it a share on social media, click like, subscribe. All those things help to expand this podcast's availability to new audiences. I'm a speaker, a coach, and a facilitator based out of Washington, D.C., but I travel a lot. If you think I can be of service to you or to your organization, help people get unstuck or move into their authentic power, shoot me an email. My email address is refractivepodcast@gmail.com. Take care. Thanks for listening, and aim your light.